World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here with our founder, Bill Moore, today. How's it going, Bill?
It's going fabulous, thank you.
All right, great. Well, let's go ahead and we'll get into this. This one is kind of an interesting article about EV tax credits. And one of the things, EV tax credits here in the United States never are easy to understand. And I guess that's when you get the government involved, they just can't make anything simple. And this one is kind of, and this applies. We're still in 2023 when we're recording this, and Americans opt to lease electric cars to tap the Biden tax credits. Now, one of the things that's interesting, when you lease a car here in the United States right now, it's considered to be a commercial versus a retail transaction. So the commercial leasing transactions do not have to qualify for the battery rules. And I'm hoping this still applies next year. I haven't seen any discussion of taking
Yeah, I
this
don't know
away,
either. Yeah,
but what happens is it allows you at the time of acquiring the car, you're able to take the $7,500 um, tax credit the dealer is and apply it to your lease payments, which typically are going to lower your cost of your car by about $200 a month on, say, a
yeah,
three-year lease. And so it's a pretty considerable way to do it. One of the things that's coming out in January, you'll be able to buy an EV and then take the tax credit at the point of purchase. But
yeah,
all of a sudden, a few cars, notably the Tesla Model 3, there were, I'm trying to remember what some of the
yeah.
others
I
were.
know there was a few others. I
The-
think the total number is like next year there are only 10 electric vehicles that qualify for the full tax credit.
yeah, and it was kind of last minute, and a lot of these vehicles were very affordable vehicles, and all of a sudden they lose the full tax credit. Some of them are still going to get half the tax credit.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of them are still, it doesn't mean they're not eligible, say, for the California or Colorado or New York tax credits, but some of those are income based and not, even the federal one's income based to a certain extent as well, but it's fairly high income. But anyways, what's interesting is 52% of EVs were leased in November, which is interesting compared to 8% a year earlier. And the reason has
yeah.
to do with, the availability to quickly apply and get the federal tax credits. And I thought this was kind of interesting. This still should work next year, even on your Tesla Model 3s. It's just you're not going to be able to, um, you know, buy them in the way you thought you might have.
Yeah, and I think part of that number for for people is there are some financial advice sites that are telling you, well, consider leasing an EV because the technology is changing so quickly that you would at the end of your 24-month or 30-month or 36-month, whatever it is, lease, the technology will have improved so much in terms of the range and even maybe cost reduction that you don't do you want to be locked into a 5, 6, 7 year car payment, right, for technology that's going to be obsolete by the time you're done, or would you like to get whatever is the most current technology? And the way to do that is just do the shorter term lease. So I'm sure there are a lot of people that are kind of thinking about that as their option besides the tax credit part.
Yeah, not all the car companies do what Tesla does, and they every time they do an upgrade on the car, they simply update the software in the car, and it changes some of the things that the car does and
Yeah,
behaves. And
that's a real edge they've got over a lot of car makers, is that ability to do over the air updates. I mean, imagine that. I mean, Tesla has to quote recall 2 million cars
Mhm.
because of the way the government is currently looking at autopilot and its shortcomings and things like that. They're not really recalling. When we think of a recall, we think, now I got to make an appointment with the dealer. I got to drag the car down there. They've got to have it for a couple days to do whatever it is that they're going to do, right? To fix this recall. Well, all Tesla has to do basically is just send, updated code over the network, and bang, you wake up the next morning, your car is fixed. whatever that fixed means.
Right.
So
Just
it's
a software update.
yeah, I mean, there is even debate about should it be called recall? Is there another better term to call something like that? If you're going to fix something, but it's all being done by a software update, right?
That you
Then
don't even have to participate in.
yeah, yeah. So anyway,
Well,
um,
it's interesting how that all plays out. So, our next article today is talking about a group called Fuel Cell Energy. Their stock leaped to a 4-month high on news that they've teamed with Exxon Mobile on game-changing carbon capture tech. Let's see what we've got here. They're working on deploying carbonate fuel cell technology globally. The unique advantage of this CFC technology is it not only captures CO2, but also produces low carbon power, heat, and hydrogen as co-products.
yeah.
Let's see if there's any more explanation of this. If
No, I
demonstrations
have,
of the technology are successful, ExxonMobil could deploy the technology at its manufacturing sites around the world.
yeah. I had to dig a little deeper than what that article had. Basically, what they have is what's called a molten carbonate fuel cell. So it's a fuel cell, unlike a PEM fuel cell, which operates at a much lower temperature. Carbonate fuel cell operates at about 600 degrees centigrade. So it's very, very hot. So it essentially is doing what a PEMS fuel cell does, the kind you would normally see inside of a something like the Toyota Miura or Hyundai's fuel cell vehicle or a fuel cell truck. These carbonate fuel cells are large fixed units. You can imagine wanting to have a engine inside your car that's running at the temperature of a volcano, like in Iceland. Right? The eruption. I've been following that because I've actually been near where that eruption is taking place. I've been to the Blue Lagoon, and it's just a few kilometers away from there. But you can imagine in your car something running at the temperature of molten lava, right?
You
So
know, it's
you
kind of
but for large commercial installations, which is what they're thinking about, this first one's going to be installed at a sort of a oil refining facility in where Rotterdam or somewhere like that in the Netherlands. Um, is where they're going to test this. So the idea is that they will capture the CO2 off of whatever industrial process is generating that. They will feed that into the molten carbonate fuel cell, which basically is taking, under normal operation, it would take methane or pure hydrogen, but normally methane, natural gas. And it'll take that and feed that into the molten carbonate, and they separate out the hydrogen, and the hydrogen passes across the catalyst, and in the process of doing that, it generates electricity as well as generating water, and in the case of the molten carbonate, more CO2. So it's just basically sort of separating that. And it's already generating CO2 in normal operation. But if you can feed it any additional carbon dioxide that's coming off of some manufacturing or refining process, you can concentrate more. It will allow you to concentrate more of the CO2 than you would normally get. You can take that then and use that for whatever process you want. In the case of the one in the Netherlands, what they're going to do is they're going to collect it, put it in a pipeline, and send it out and bury it in the North Sea. So it's an experiment, but expensive, right? So this is one approach to where you get energy and you get carbon capture out of it. And I think it generate oxygen. I can't remember about the molten
well
carbonate.
generated hydrogen.
Right. Yeah. So it gets that's right. It gets the hydrogen out of it. So you're getting hydrogen, you're getting electricity, and you're getting concentrated CO2, which you can then take for some other industrial process, or you could take and ship it out into the ocean, bury it out under the ocean. So that's what they're going to do. So, but it has potential promise, but again, I think I've read that I forget now. It's several times more expensive to do this than it would be to do something else with the carbon. So we'll see how the economics work out. But game changer, maybe. I'm skeptical, but let's see what happens.
We hear that a lot, don't we?
Yeah, we hear
Yeah.
we hear it a lot. It's a favorite headline. Game changing and breakthroughs the other word. Breakthrough and
It,
game changing. Well,
I usually see it in front of some new battery technology
right.
or
Yeah.
hydrogen, you
Yep.
know, and like the whole idea about the hydrogen engine that you just fill it with water and then they don't tell you it's distilled water, so you got to
Yeah.
distill the
Well,
water and then
there's YouTube videos. I've watched a couple of them where you can take and you bolt these things together and you use a canister like you'd have in your kitchen, a clear canister, and
Mhm.
bamboo top screwed to it. You do some drilling and things, and then you hook a double A, a D cell battery or something like that to it. And damn, it starts producing hydrogen. Well, sure it does. But it takes energy to make energy, right? It's just not
Right.
the thing is that hydrogen is not a fuel. And that's one thing I learned very early on. Hydrogen is not a fuel, folks. Hydrogen is an energy carrier. It's a way to concentrate energy from one source and move it to another source. And that process can also be expensive and has its risks. So
Like the Hindenburg.
yeah. Hey, did you see that Serge Brench and his company has actually built the world's first dirigible since the Hindenburg? They've
No, didn't know
actually,
that.
yeah, they've actually flown. It's about half of the size of the Hindenburg. It's about 400 feet long, as opposed to the Hindenburg, which was 800 and some feet long. But they've actually built one, and they've pulled it out of the hangar because the thing's floating. In this case, they're not using hydrogen wisely. They're using helium, which is
Right.
not which is non-combustible. So
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it's really funny. And people like, you can only think of that one incident, with hydrogen. It's like, well, there hasn't been much hydrogen use since then.
yeah, and Germany, of course, Germany didn't have access to
Helium.
helium. We had access to helium in this country because of the Texas oil boom at the time.
Hmm.
And so we were able to pull all this hydrogen off of these oil wells we had in Texas and use that to, fill dirigibles. And, we had what I think it was called the Akron. And there was some Navy blimps that we used during the war for anti-submarine warfare and things like that. And in fact, even the blimps that we still see, flying around are all using helium rather than hydrogen. This hydrogen is just too dangerous, potentially dangerous a gas.
Yeah, well, understandable. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on in London with electric buses.
This is yeah.
Let's-
This is. I remember when they actually started to roll out some of the first buses. Some of the first buses over there were built by Mercedes.
This
Uh,
one's made out of
they-
cake. This one looks like it's made out
well,
of
yeah,
cake.
this was made out of cake to celebrate because Go Ahead London, which is a contracted bus operator for the City of London, for London Transport, has been operating. They hit their 10th anniversary of operating. These are BYD K9Es or something like that,
Hmm.
buses, and they have the single story buses, and they also have the double classic red double deckers. But they hit their 10th anniversary of operating electric buses in London, and there's hundreds of them now operating, in the city, in and around the city of London. So I just thought
So,
I'm always curious as to what you hear these announcements, and how Chicago, for example, ran some early electric buses and had problems, and then we've got the Proterra thing over here. impacting bus op system operators. Um, so they've had good luck, apparently good luck and success. I'm waiting to hear from Richard Harrington, who's their technology director for Go Ahead London, that just to get some feedback on their experiences. Obviously the buses have been operating, for a decade, and they've got something like over 300 of them. So apparently those buses have been operating, operating well for them, uh, you know,
Yeah. Well,
from a
this group
scheduling point of view and from a financial point of view.
well, this group has 520 operating now
Is it
in
520? Yeah.
London. Yeah, and 670 zero emission buses. Well, across the
Across
UK,
the UK.
they have
Yeah.
another 150,
Yeah.
but they
Yes.
expect to be 1,000 in London by 26. And
Yeah. They're going to
currently,
replace their entire fleet with these. So,
yeah, so there's 1,100 total battery electric buses in operation in London between different carriers, and that represents 13% of London buses. So one out of six, no,
yeah.
one out of eight, about one out of eight
Yeah.
buses is electric.
Yeah.
40,
There's still, the famous Roadmasters, which are diesel buses. They still operate lots and lots of those, but we're beginning to see a transition starting to take place, and that's interesting. So congratulations to Go Ahead London for your 10-year milestone. That's great.
yep. And of course, in the bus industry, they still just look like buses. There's nothing different looking about the electric buses, nothing like that. I mean, buses have been experimenting with alternative fuels for years. You can always still have the diesel buses or whatever, but you see lots of propane buses or
Yeah,
natural gas and
yeah,
things like that. There's certainly been lots of attempts at alternative fuel sources that are cleaner burning than what we've had. I wanted to talk a little bit about what Atlanta is doing to help. They're subsidizing e-bikes in
yeah,
Atlanta, and this is a little bit based on income, and they're trying really hard to grow sales around at bike stores, different things. They're trying to get people to really start using the electric bikes to, go back and forth to work and, you know, run other errands. And what's interesting to see where the money is, any Atlanta resident would be eligible for $500 to $1,000 rebate on e-bikes, while low-income buyers could see anywhere from $1,500 to a $2,000 rebate, which should pretty much make,
that would
most of
get
those
you a
bikes
really
free.
nice bike. Yeah,
Yeah, so like you and I were talking about before we got on the show, that I'd like to see maybe if they had a way to track it and compensated people a buck or two every day for riding their bike, you
yeah.
know,
They
and
do that. They do that in some European countries or some European cities. They actually have a system to compensate you for, when you per diem or whatever you would call it,
right.
to ride your bike. Yeah,
Well, I think that would really get people, and make them really think about doing the transition.
yeah,
And it doesn't be a big number. It could be $1, but it might be enough to convince people to say, "Hey, I'm getting paid to ride my bike
yeah.
and not drive the car." And who knows what the communities would save in terms of just the cost of fixing roads, and other types of things like that that might be beneficial to the
Well,
community, not just
yeah.
from the environment.
Well, and they could take. Hopefully, they would take and in the process make sure that they create a system of safe, bike lanes. We've got a few here in Omaha. There's a lot of improvement that needs to be made in with respect to that, because they're finding that when there's a safe biking environment, people are a lot more willing to to hop on a bike and go ride chores or commute to school or to work or whatever. So it's got to be a two prong, at least a two-pronged effort.
Well, and some of it's a little excessive. So a few years ago over in Bellevue uh, oh, I can't think of the name of the street.
Yeah,
Fort
yeah,
Crook. On Fort Crook, they put in those bicycle lanes.
right.
And I guess they just expected people were just all of a sudden going to just start riding their bikes like it was
Well,
going to be an immediate transition, and it just didn't happen. And then they got rid of the bike lanes like a year
no,
later.
yeah. Well, they weren't. The bike lanes, if I recall, were not segregated, separate from the normal highway traffic. That's a 4-lane highway through there, and it's a primary commuting route apart from the adjacent interstate across, which really gets to be
Right.
crazy rush hour. But if you're going downtown to downtown Omaha, that's that 4-lane road through there, and those were not segregated. You were right there. I remember seeing them. You were right there with the traffic, and who knows what guy that was hung over from the weekend trying to rush into work and not. I didn't see him, Your Honor. Kind of a situation. So we got to, if you're going to do this right, you got to do the Dutch model or the Danish model. You've got to have it segregated and safe, and then you're going to incur, particularly women, because women are really sensitive to this. And so to get more people on bikes, especially the fairer sex, you need to have it really, really safe and convenient for them. In fact, there's where did I see this? I think over in Korea. Was it Korea? Anyway, there's one of the countries overseas. They are building a separate bike lane between the highways. The divided
Hmm.
highway that is covered with solar panels. And so
Oh, wow.
you've got segregated from the traffic. You've got shade that happens to be also generating power for the local, for the community. So there's kind of some cool ideas that can be done like that, but
Well,
it
you think
costs
about
money. So
right, right. Well, you think about it, we have medians and all of our highways and stuff like that. They're all those medians are big enough. You could certainly have a bike path down the
and
middle of
depending
something
on
like
where you're
that for the most
talking
part.
about, depending
Yeah.
on where you're talking about, like from Omaha to Lincoln, uh, put a light rail through there.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot, and that would make a lot of sense because you look at how many people go from Omaha to Lincoln for sporting events,
Yeah,
and because that's
or
where
just to
everything
work.
happens. Yeah,
Yeah,
or
just
just to
just
work.
the people that work between the two cities.
But you could certainly haul a lot of people on light rail between the two cities, um, from that perspective. But at
What
what cost? But at what
when I
cost? What?
Yeah, when I started EV World 25 years ago, one of the things that intrigued me was a proposal for a light light rail system, and the thing had been engineered in such a way that the vehicles themselves, the train, if you want to call it that, was super affordable. It wasn't big, heavy sort of thing you would see if taking the L Street or the L in Chicago. Um, and then the rail system was similarly modular and so on, so you didn't have to. You could lay it down a lot quicker and so on. And they built this. I think it was at the Alameda Naval Base was where they built sort of a short demonstrator thing, and it looked like promise. But again, it's like so many things that have promise. It didn't go anywhere then. But back then I thought, oh, that would be cool to put something like that between Omaha and Lincoln,
Right.
um, and we'd reduce some of the traffic, the congestion on that road. But you know, we'd rather take 4 lanes and expand to 6 and expand to 8, and
Right. No, I get that. And it's really not that crazy busy of a corridor by any stretch.
yeah,
I used to drive a fair amount between, say, Memphis and Nashville, and it's only
mm,
2 lanes on each side for half of that distance.
yeah,
And man, what a crazy busy highway, and just
yeah,
loaded with 18 wheelers. Like every
oh
other
yeah,
vehicle would be a tractor trailer there.
yeah.
Whereas I-80 has 18 wheelers, but it's not the same. You don't
You're,
get the same kind of traffic on 80 you
you're
do on
picking up
40
all that commercial traffic out of the Carolinas and across Tennessee,
to Texas
then
and
into
all the way
Arkansas.
to the West Coast.
I know that road. I've driven it.
Yeah.
across Oklahoma, Texas, and then ultimately you're in California. So
Yeah,
Southern California.
40's busy all the way, just
Yeah,
like I-10. They're all busy, busy the whole length of the
yeah,
interstate just because there's so much truck traffic, if nothing else.
yeah.
Anyways, our last topic today, we're going to talk about the electric car that drove from the North Pole to the South Pole.
Oh yeah, this is a cool story. Congratulations to the Ramsey. I was skeptical that they could do this, but apparently, they did it. With the cooperation of Nissan and a company that specializes in these kind of off-road snow capable vehicles. But they drove this thing. They started at the magnetic North Pole, which is basically up in northern Canada, and then they drove it. The two of them, they had a tent built and different things, and they drove it from there. What was it, 13,000 miles, something like that, all the way down to the South Pole. Now, of course, two legs of that had to be by boat because you can't cross Panama. There's Darien. I think it's called the Darien Gap, I believe, which is south of the Panama Canal and into Colombia. You can't go. There are no roads there, so it's all swamp.
Oh, wow.
So everybody has to take a boat out of Panama and then to either a port that's on the Caribbean side of Colombia or on the Pacific side of Colombia. I'm guessing they probably did the Pacific side of Colombia because it gets you closer to the Pan American Highway, which is what they would have then traveled down to get to Argentina. And then, obviously picked up because unlike Elon saying that someday you'll be able to drive your cyber truck like a boat, this was not designed to float. So I
Right.
suspect they took some kind of a freighter that specializes in supplying the research stations in Antarctica. Probably took them down there and they offloaded it, and then from there they drove across the snow to the South Pole, which is a remarkable feat. And the thing that they stressed is this car, depending on temperature and where they are and the conditions, only has a maximum range of just a little over 200 miles on a charge. And in some cases, it's only 150 miles. So they point out that we drove this thing that wherever it is, 13,000, 16,000 miles, whatever it is, we drove that on the range that most people sort of say, well, that's not enough range for an electric car, but they did it. They did
Now,
it.
they're towing behind them a 5 kilowatt hour power
Winter,
generating wind turbine.
right. Yeah,
And that,
well, they had to get their power somewhere sometime. So,
yes.
but yeah, but they were able to make that trip, which is just what did it take? I think it was like, what, 7 months, 9 months, something like that to make the trip. Um, so that's just incredible. Now, I mentioned before we went on the air that there is a fruitcake connection here.
Oh, God.
This morning I watched a video. There's a cook sort of a cooking show that I like to watch called Tasting History, and he takes old recipes from cookbooks that date back to the Renaissance and the Middle Ages, and he bakes these things. And so what we talked about today was fruitcake, which happens to be one of my specialties, actually. But he took a recipe out of a Civil War cookbook. But then he told this story. He said that, and this is where the connection to the South Pole is that the Scott expedition to the South Pole in the over a century ago now, took with them as part of their ship stores. They took with them fruitcake from a company in London. And they get that because of very high, it's sugar and flour and eggs, butter and fruit. And so this is sort of what is it? Um, oh, come on, the ship's biscuits, right? Is sort of like the ship's biscuits of 200 years earlier. So they took the fruitcake with them. But apparently, when they set off on their sleds and things across to reach the North Pole or reach the South Pole, they forgot the fruitcake. And so the expedition, they made it to the South Pole, but on the way back, they all died of starvation and exposure. Then, 100, I think he said 117 years later, they discovered the fruitcake.
Oh, wow.
And it was in better condition than the tin box it had been stored in.
Hmm.
So if they had taken the fruitcake with them, the mission would have been a success. But they forgot the fruitcake, and because of that, But that was the connection. I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting connection to this story of the Ramses, going to the South Pole and
So,
successfully making it back, even
so
if
they
they
did
had
take the
even if
fruitcake?
they had to tow a wind turbine.
So they did take the fruitcake with them?
Well, no, I don't know if the Ramses had fruitcake,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, the Scott expedition had it, but they forgot to take it. So,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
since Christmas is kind of the season of fruitcakes, I thought that was an interesting story.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
Totally nothing to do with EVs, of course.
Yes, but it is kind of crazy that to think that
Yeah,
it's like, oh, well, what can we do that nobody else has done? Let's drive from the North Pole to the South Pole. Oh,
right,
sure, let's just go do that. That sounds like a fun trip.
right.
Yeah, I can only imagine just that's a lot. Are we there yet? Are we
Are
there
we
yet?
there yet? Well,
Well,
that is one they deserve to give lectures on how a husband and wife could take on
10 months in a
an
car.
adventure like that and not go stir crazy and divorce each other when it was all over. So,
I want to know how much she drove.
well, we should get in touch with them and ask them.
I guess we could do that.
I bet they shared it. I bet they
Yeah,
shared it.
I'm sure they did a lot. Anyways, well, that's all we got for today, Bill. So good show
Hey,
today.
it's been fun.
Great. Go ahead and end it, everybody. Thanks for listening.